All right, diving in today, we're tackling a chapter that really grabbed my attention, all about complete trust in reality.
Interesting title.
Yeah, and the author takes it even further, talking about surrendering to this, well, kind of mind-bending concept of an infinite and all-pervasive consciousness.
Oh, okay, I'm intrigued already. Where'd you find this?
It's actually from a larger work on self-improvement, but this chapter, it just stood out. It's got these unique elements you don't see every day. Like the author uses indoor gymnastics as a metaphor for inner work.
Wow, that's different. I'm picturing like mental backflips or something.
Right. And then it combines that with this emphasis on visual imagination as a tool. I don't know, it just feels really fresh.
So is this chapter for like hardcore self-help folks or anyone feeling a little lost?
Honestly, I think it's for anyone,
Yeah.
whether you're feeling down, looking for a change, or just curious about this whole idea of a universal consciousness. I mean, it gets deep, but that's where the good stuff is,
It,
right?
I'm with you there. So what's on the agenda for this deep dive?
Well, we're going to explore what it means to hit rock bottom, get inspired by some incredible stories of overcoming hardship, and then get ready for this.
Yeah.
We'll even tie it all back to the Big Bang.
The Big Bang. Now that's a twist I wasn't expecting.
I know, right? But it all comes together in a way that, at least for me, was really thought-provoking.
All right, lead the way. I'm ready to get deep.
Okay, so the chapter starts off by painting this really vivid picture of what hitting rock bottom can look like.
Like bottom of the barrel, can't go any lower kind of thing.
Exactly. And the author doesn't shy away from the tough stuff. They talk about disease, loss, addiction, mental struggles, the full spectrum of human suffering.
Right, but I'm guessing the point isn't to wallow in misery.
Definitely not. It's more like acknowledging that darkness exists
Hmm.
and that this chapter is meant for people at any point on that spectrum. Whether you're currently in a tough spot or feeling pretty good right now, there's something here for you.
It's like meeting people where they're at, offering a potential lifeline, or just a new perspective.
I like that. And speaking of perspective, the author then shifts gears and starts sharing these incredible stories of people who've faced unbelievable challenges and come out the other side.
Oh, I love those kinds of stories. They always give me hope. What kind of stories are we talking about?
Well, there are these athletes competing at the highest level who happen to be limbless. You've got recovering addicts who've battled their demons and found a new way of life. And then there are folks facing incurable illnesses, yet finding joy and meaning in each day.
Those are powerful examples. It really speaks to the human spirit, that inner strength we all possess. It's like no matter what life throws at you, there's always a way to rise above.
That's what struck me too. It's a reminder that struggle is universal. We all face challenges, and yet there's this inherent resilience within us all.
I think that's such an important message, especially in today's world. It's easy to get caught up in our own problems and forget that everyone's going through something.
Totally. Now, think about your own life for a second. Have you ever faced a situation where you thought, there's no way out of this,
Hmm.
and then somehow you found a way through?
Hmm. That question actually makes me think of a time. It's funny. That question really got me thinking. It's like we all have those moments, those challenges that feel insurmountable at the time, but somehow we find a way.
Right. And those are the stories that really stick with us, the ones that remind us of our own strength and resilience.
Absolutely. So where were we? Yes, the author was setting up this connection to something bigger.
The Big Bang. Which, honestly, when I first read it, I was like, wait, where is this going?
It does seem like a bit of a leap, doesn't it? Going from personal struggles to the creation of the universe.
Right. But the way the author lays it out, it actually starts to make sense. They basically walk us through the whole story of the Big Bang, that initial explosion, then billions of years of cosmic evolution, all leading up to the formation of Earth and eventually life as we know it.
Okay, so it's not just a random science lesson dropped in there.
Nope. It's all about setting up this bigger idea, this concept of an invisible, infinite, and all-pervasive consciousness. The author's argument is that given the sheer improbability of all those events happening in just the right way for us to exist.
It makes you wonder if it was just random chance or something more, right?
Exactly. And that's where the chapter takes this leap of faith. Because let's be real, this isn't something you could prove scientifically. It's a belief.
Right, and I think the author acknowledges that. They're not trying to shove this belief down our throats. It's more like an invitation to consider a different perspective.
Totally. And the way they frame it, it's actually pretty clever. They point out that we all believe in tons of things we haven't personally experienced. Like, have you ever seen an atom?
Uh-huh, good point.
Right. We just accept it because, well, science tells us it's true. And then there are people who believe the Earth is flat, despite all evidence to the contrary. So the author's like, why not entertain this idea of a universal consciousness? What if there's more to reality than we can see or measure?
It's about opening ourselves up to the possibility, even if it seems a little out there at first. But I have to ask, if this force is so good, why is there so much bad stuff happening in the world? Wars, famines, diseases, you name it.
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Hmm.
And the author doesn't shy away from it. They actually dedicate a whole section to addressing this apparent contradiction.
So what's the explanation?
Well, it's a bit nuanced. They start by looking at how nature works. Like plants and animals, they act on instinct, right? Often causing harm without even realizing it. It's just their nature. But humans, with our free will, we add another layer of complexity.
We have the capacity for both great good and great harm.
Exactly. And the author suggests that sometimes we just mess things up. We make choices that go against the grain of this universal consciousness, and that creates suffering.
So it's not that this force is causing the bad stuff, but that we, with our free will, are kind of mucking things up.
That's one way to interpret it. And honestly, it's up to each individual to decide if that explanation resonates with them.
Yeah.
The author isn't trying to provide all the answers, but rather to spark a deeper conversation within ourselves.
It's about challenging our assumptions and exploring different ways of seeing the world. And speaking of different ways of seeing things, the author then introduces this concept of a second birth.
Okay, not a literal birth.
Right, more like a metaphorical rebirth. It's about experiencing a profound shift in your worldview, where this belief in a universal consciousness becomes your central guiding principle. It's like saying, okay, I'm letting go of my old ways of thinking and embracing this new understanding of reality.
So it's not just an intellectual exercise. It's about a fundamental change in how you view yourself and your place in the world.
Exactly. And the author makes this really interesting point that often it's our biggest challenges, those rock bottom moments, that push us towards this transformation. It's like when everything falls apart, we're forced to reevaluate our beliefs, our priorities, our whole approach to life.
It's in those moments of vulnerability that we're most open to change.
Precisely. And that's where the real work begins. Because it's one thing to intellectually grasp this concept of a universal consciousness, but it's another thing entirely to actually live it, to embody it in your everyday life.
So how do we do that? How do we make that shift from intellectual understanding to lived experience?
Well, the author outlines a path, and it all starts with the decision. You have to choose to believe. It's not about just passively accepting things as they are, you know?
Yeah.
It's more about actively aligning your actions with this belief.
So making choices that, even if they don't seem immediately beneficial to us, kind of reflect that trust in a larger good.
Yeah, exactly. Letting go of that need to micromanage everything, you know? It's almost like becoming a co-creator with this universal consciousness, rather than trying to be the sole author of our own story.
But I feel like that goes against so much of what we're taught, right? Like striving for success, being in control of our destiny, that whole individualistic thing.
Oh, for sure. The author addresses that tension. It's not like flipping a switch, you know? There are going to be times when you're like, wait, is this really working? You're going to doubt, you're going to question, and you're going to want to grab the steering wheel back.
So more like building a muscle. The more you practice, the stronger it gets.
That's a great analogy. And one of the key ways the author suggests we strengthen this surrender muscle is through mindfulness. You know, being present in each moment, noticing your thoughts and feelings without judging them.
So not getting swept away by every little emotion or those negative thought spirals we all get stuck in sometimes.
Exactly. It's more like becoming an observer, you know, watching those thoughts and feelings come and go without getting all tangled up in them.
So from that place of calm observation, that's where we can start to make more conscious choices.
That's the idea. The author talks about asking yourself, okay, is this action aligned with my belief in a universal consciousness? Is this coming from fear and ego, or is this coming from a place of trust and surrender?
Constantly checking in, making sure those actions are matching up with those deep down beliefs.
Right. And the author also emphasizes gratitude as a huge part of this process because, you know, focusing on what you're grateful for shifts your perspective. Instead of lack and scarcity, it's like you're tuning into abundance and interconnectedness.
What you focus on expands,
Yeah.
right? Dwelling on what's missing just brings more of that feeling. But appreciating what's there, even the small stuff, That's got to open up a different experience entirely.
And in that shift, in that change of perspective, that's where we start to tap into the real power of this complete trust in reality idea. It's not just about feeling better, it's about this deeper knowing that you're part of something much larger, something that's guiding you and supporting you, even when you can't see the full picture.
It's a really powerful message.
Yeah.
And I think it's something a lot of people are searching for right now, especially with so much uncertainty in the world. This idea of surrendering to something bigger, trusting that there's a plan even if we don't get it. There's a real comfort in that.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember it's not about becoming passive or giving up your agency. It's more about recognizing that, hey, we're not in control of everything, and that's okay. In fact, sometimes it's in that surrender that we find true freedom and peace.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into complete trust in reality, what would you say is the one key takeaway for our listeners?
You know, if even a tiny bit of what we've discussed resonated with you, I'd encourage you to experiment. Try bringing some of these practices into your own life. Like, what would it look like to make a decision from a place of surrender? Or just pause for a moment and ask, what am I grateful for right now? Even if you don't fully embrace this idea of a universal consciousness, there's so much value in cultivating trust, mindfulness, and gratitude.
It's invitation to step outside of our comfort zones,
Hmm.
to let go of the illusion of control and embrace a more expansive way of being. Our deep dive might be ending here, but I have a feeling this exploration is just beginning for our listeners.